She was swallowed by the earth in 1984, but she was still breathing, still bleeding. No search parties, no headlines, just silence, because the devil wore a father's face, and the walls obeyed him. You are not ready for this, but you're already here. This isn't just about Elisabeth Fritzl. This is about what happens when evil doesn't hide in shadows, but signs the mortgage, locks the basement, and sits at the head of the table. This is about Austria, 1984, but it could have been your town, your father, your neighbor. The mask changes. The ritual DOESN single quotes T. 17-year-old Elisabeth disappeared without a trace. The police had a note, written in her terrified hand. It said she ran away, joined a cult. She never did. She never left. She was still beneath the house while her mother vacuumed upstairs. And the man who locked her there? He was her father, Josef Fritzl, a man with keys to every door. And no one ever asked why. But here's what no one tells you: monsters like him aren't anomalies, they're archetypes. They exist in every structure that rewards silence, obedience, and hierarchy. The real prison was not just under his home, it was inside his mind. And society let it spread. You see, Josef didn't just trap his daughter. He created a private universe, a closed system of control, a place where no law could reach and no God dared to look. He designed that cellar like an altar, a sacrifice chamber disguised as plumbing and concrete. And for 24 years, he'd played God. Now here's the part they'll never say on mainstream documentaries. The world didn't miss her, because the world didn't want to know. This is the real disease. We are trained from birth to not see what's too uncomfortable, to obey authority, to doubt victims, to never question the father figure, to never look in the basement. Because if you did, you might see something familiar. What Josef did with his hands, institutions do with laws, governments do with silence, religions do with ritual, society does with shame. It wasn't just a crime. It was a blueprint, and you're starting to see it now, aren't you? The prison wasn't buried under one Austrian home. It's under every system that calls itself civilized. It's in the jobs we never question, the rules we obey without asking, the chains we decorate and call tradition. You were born in a cage. You were handed the script. You were told what to believe, and if you questioned it, you became dangerous, just like Elisabeth did. But here's the twist that haunts me most. What if the world wanted her in that basement? Because if she walked free, we'd all have to confront what we really live under. What if the cage is not hidden ... but accepted? And the door's been open all along? You're still here. Good. That means the veil is already thinning. Now look deeper. This isn't just about a man locking his daughter in a cellar. It's about what kind of system produces a man like Josef Fritzl and lets him build a kingdom of nightmares beneath the floorboards. You see, Josef wasn't insane in the way you're told. He was methodical, calculated, bureaucratic in his evil. He planned the prison for years, not in madness, but in perfect logic. He pulled permits, studied blueprints, dug the hole with state-approved tools. The monster wore a tie, paid his taxes, shook hands at the hardware store. The walls of Elisabeth's dungeon weren't just concrete. They were proof of compliance, built it under everyone's nose, because no one wanted to believe that horror could be engineered by a normal man. But that's the lie. Evil doesn't come with fangs and flames. It comes with good credit and a calm smile. Fritzl was a state-approved God in his own home. And like all gods, he created a world, a simulation, where only his will mattered. Inside that chamber, he rewrote reality. He stripped time from the clock. He decided when the lights came on, when food arrived, when his daughter lived or bled or gave birth. Yes, gave birth. Elisabeth bore 7 children in that pit. Now pause. Don't just hear that. Feel it. She gave birth Not in a hospital, not with a midwife, but on a cold basement floor. While the man who forced himself upon her watched like a god, inspecting his creation. And nobody heard a thing. Because the walls weren't just soundproof, they were reinforced by apathy, by blind trust in authority, by a culture that never suspects. The patriarch. This is deeper than crime. This is mythology playing out in real time. The father as king, the daughter as captive, the womb as altar, blood as sacrifice, silence as worship. He made himself the architect of suffering, a builder of hell, with the permission of the surface world. And here's what should disturb you most. He's not alone. Every institution has its Fritzl. Every power structure breeds its own architects of darkness. They don't hide in cellars. They hide in contracts, uniforms, rituals, flags. They tell you they're protecting you. While they tightened the lock, Fritzl wasn't a glitch. He was the mirror, held up to a society too afraid to look in its own basement. You want to be awake? Then you need to understand. Every house has its shadows. Every family has its secrets. Every system has its dungeon. And the ones who build them, they don't hide. They're usually the ones you trust the most. You think this is about a broken family? It's not. This is about how society teaches obedience so deeply, so silently, that even a daughter in chains thinks she deserves the silence. Elisabeth wasn't just a victim. She was trained to be compliant. From birth, like all of us, she was conditioned to obey the voice of authority, to confuse love with control, to call the cage safety, to mistake domination for order. That's how the system works. You're born into hierarchy. You're punished for defiance. You're rewarded for silence. And by the time you're old enough to question it, you've already become part of the machine. Fritzl didn't need to use chains every day. He had something stronger, psychological architecture. He was her father, her protector, her provider. The very man who created her was now her God. And when a God hurts you, who do you cry out to? There's no escape when your prison is also your belief system. But that's the part no one wants to admit. Because we're all living under the same blueprint. Your school, obedience training. Your job, behavioral conditioning. Your media, emotional distraction. Your government, the father figure with global reach. Always watching, always punishing, always right. You're told who to fear, what to think, how to act, or you're cast out. And what happens to the cast outs? They disappear. They vanish like Elisabeth. Not always underground, but into silence, into madness, into exile. The rules are simple. Obey, conform, smile. And if you suffer, do it quietly. Elisabeth's body was imprisoned, yes. But long before that, her mind was. That's what made the rest possible. This isn't a horror story. This is a manual, a step-by-step on how to break a human soul, and how society enables it by calling it family values. So look around. Ask yourself, where in your life have you mistaken obedience for morality? Who told you suffering was noble? Who made you believe that being small was the same as being good? You were taught to stay in your lane, to keep your voice down, to respect the system. But the system has never respected you. It raises Fritzls. It buries Elisabeths. And it applauds itself for law and order, while horror festers beneath the foundation. What else have we failed to hear? What other cries have been muffled by concrete, by tradition, by Father knows best? You want freedom? Then stop worshiping the voice that taught you to kneel. Stop mistaking your leash for a lifeline. Stop calling your captor protector. Because when obedience becomes identity, you don't need a locked door to be trapped. You're beginning to feel it now, the tremor beneath the surface. Because this isn't just about one man's evil. It's about what that evil reveals. Every civilization has its rituals, its sacrifices, its silent agreements. We like to think we've evolved, that we've left behind the burning altars, the blood rites, the ancient cages, but we haven't. We've just made them efficient. In Josef Fritzl's cellar, the ritual was primal. He descended those stairs like a priest. He brought offerings, scraps of food, flickering bulbs, cruelty disguised as mercy. And then he took what he wanted: time, flesh, power. And no god stopped him, because the gods of this age are systems that reward obedience, systems that protect the dominant, systems that silence the weak. You think this was just about sadism? No. This was a ritual of domination. And like all rituals, it had its symbols: the hidden door, the keypad code, the buzzing lock, the trap disguised as security. Every part of that basement was sacred to him. It was his temple of control. He engineered suffering with the precision of a state planner. Because he didn't see Elisabeth as a daughter. He saw her as a vessel, a utility, a thing he owned. And society didn't challenge that, not until it was too late. Because society performs its own rituals. We worship family, no matter how broken. We sanctify fathers, no matter how cruel. We protect the image, even if it hides the truth. The most dangerous phrase in any language is, "That could never happen here." That's how the ritual stays hidden. That's how the sacrifice continues. You want to know why this story stayed buried for so long? Because we don't like stories that break the myth of the good home. Because we don't want to admit that horror lives in the suburbs, that monsters wear slippers and read the paper, that sometimes the safest looking house is the one you never escape. This is bigger than Fritzl. This is about what we choose to ignore, what we label impossible so we don't have to confront it. But listen carefully. Every system that ignores suffering, every law that upholds silence, every tradition that rewards control, is participating in the same ritual, and we are the witnesses. The priests, or the sacrifices. You've been taught to fear chaos. But the real terror is order, when it's enforced by men who believe they are gods. That's what Fritzl was. Not a madman, a priest of control. And his temple was built beneath the most sacred lie in our culture, that what happens in the family stays in the family. Let's stop pretending this was just silence. It wasn't. It was screaming, but only for those who had ears trained to hear what's real, not what's comfortable. You know the kind of silence I'm talking about. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of fear. The kind that saturates a room before anything is said. The kind that crawls under your skin when someone looks away at the truth and chooses the lie instead. That's what Elisabeth lived in. Her screams when they came weren't just for help. They were a final attempt at remembering she was human. But the concrete didn't answer. The ceiling didn't move. And the man upstairs? He was counting how long he could play God before someone noticed the weather. Underground, and no one did. That is the scream. It's the echo of absence. The proof that no system, no authority, no structure built to protect her ever really looked. And why would they? We build our cultures on the backs of unseen suffering. We wear comfort like a skin, stitched together by the hands of the buried. Factory workers, forgotten children, women in locked basements, men in mental prisons. We walk through malls, scroll past headlines, and we ignore the screaming, because the truth is heavy. And once you hear it, you can't go back to pretending. Elisabeth's silence was a message, not just to her captor, but to us. She survived 24 years in that cellar. She gave birth to 7 children, cut the umbilical cords herself, held dying infants in her arms, buried one in the dirt under a cage built by her own father. Can you feel that? That is not silence. That is the roar of a world that chose not to listen. And now you're hearing it. This story isn't just historical horror. It's a mirror, and it's facing you now. What part of you has been trapped? What scream have you buried beneath politeness? What warning have you ignored because the truth was inconvenient? Don't look away, because this is how it always starts. A man closes a door, a family looks the other way. The town believes the note, and the world shrugs. That's all it takes, not evil, just indifference. And indifference is what makes the silence scream. So now you're standing here at the edge of the descent. No more distance, no more safe stories. From this point on, the light fades, and the deeper truths begin to speak. If you're still with me, it means you're ready to listen. But just know, what you're about to hear may never let you sleep the same again. They were born without sky, no sun, no wind, no open space. Only shadows on concrete, flickering light bulbs, and a mother whose voice was the only thing between them and madness. These were the children of the cellar, the forgotten offspring of power and imprisonment, the innocent product of violence so deep it imitated creation. Elisabeth gave birth to 7 lives underground. No midwife, no pain relief, no clean water. Just her, a girl turned mother, kneeling on a mattress that reeked of damp and blood, biting down on cloth to keep her screams from reaching ears that didn't want to hear. She caught her own children, tied their cords with shoelaces, wiped their faces with scraps of cloth, named them, loved them. Inside a cage. And Josef? He came down after, examined them like inventory, sometimes pleased, sometimes silent, always in control. This isn't childbirth. It's ritualized domination. Do you understand the depth of that? To create life in a place where life was never meant to exist? To nurture innocence inside a dungeon designed for despair? It's the definition of power's lie, the illusion that creation can justify captivity. That if something grows, it must mean things are working. This lie exists everywhere. In factories where children make shoes, in marriages ruled by fear, in classrooms where questions are punishable, in systems where pain is repackaged as order. But back to the cellar, 3 of those children lived their entire lives down there. No outside world, no trees, no birds. Their sky was a ceiling. Their sun was a fluorescent bulb. And you want to know something haunting? They adapted. They played. They laughed. They invented stories and drew on the walls. Because children always adapt. But adaptation doesn't mean freedom. It means the human spirit is being trained to survive inside a prison. How many of us are doing the same? How many men watching this were raised in homes where there was no violence, but also no truth? No chains, but also no escape? You've built lives inside cages too. The difference is yours came with a mortgage and a title deed. That's the genius of modern control. You make the prisoner defend the prison. So now ask yourself, what parts of your life have no sky? Where have you confused routine for meaning? Structure for safety? Control for love? The children of the cellar weren't just victims. They were symbols. Symbols of what happens when the next generation is raised beneath the sins of the last and is told to call it normal. But they felt the wrongness. Even in the dark, they knew there was something above, something better, something that had been stolen from them. And when that door finally opened, they didn't just walk in the light. They walked into truth, but truth burns after darkness. And some of them never adjusted. It took 24 years. 24 years of silence, 24 years of rape, confinement, birth, sickness, and death in a concrete tomb beneath a 2-story house. And when the door finally cracked open, the world didn't find a monster. It found a man in glasses. Calm, soft-spoken, respectable. That was the final insult. The Wolf didn't wear a mask. He wore a smile, and the neighbors, they couldn't believe it. He was so polite. He kept to himself. He was a good provider. This is how deep the illusion goes. When the system finally stumbled into truth, not by virtue, but by accident, it wasn't ready. A child from the cellar, severely ill, was rushed to a hospital. Doctors asked questions. The answers didn't add up. And for the first time, the lie cracked. But it wasn't courage that exposed it. It was a glitch. A moment when the mask slipped and the machine hesitated just long enough for truth to bleed. Through doubt, this is the part no one tells you. The truth was always visible. It was written in inconsistencies, in files that didn't match, in neighbors' suspicions they buried under politeness, in a wife's intuition she drowned in fear. The devil didn't hide. He simply relied on the world's unwillingness to. Look, how many lies do you walk past each day? How many doors are locked behind you that no one wants to open? How many respectable men hold unthinkable power over those too broken to speak? We built a society that requires illusion, a culture that demands denial. So when the truth finally shows its face, it feels like an earthquake, but the ground was always cracked. We just refused to see it. When Josef Fritzl was arrested, he didn't confess from guilt. He confessed because the story was no longer his to control. That's what these men fear most. Not prison, not shame, but losing the narrative. He built a world in that cellar, a kingdom, a theology of control. And for 2 decades, the world let him rule it. And when the lights finally came on, the real horror was not what we found beneath the house. It was what we saw in ourselves. How long we let it happen. How easily we believed the story. How many of us would have looked away, even if we'd known something was wrong. This is why I say, evil doesn't need secrecy. It just needs your cooperation. It thrives not on blood, but on apathy, on polite denial, on the belief that someone else will take care of it. So when the lie breaks, you have a choice: return to comfort, or walk into the fire, because truth is not a light. It's a burning. Do you want to understand the mind of a man like Josef Fritzl? Then you have to go beyond evil, beyond cruelty. You have to step into the domain of false divinity, where men play gods, not with fire or thunder, but with rules, rituals, and silence. Fritzl wasn't just trying to dominate. He was trying to create. To shape a reality where he alone defined right and wrong, where there were no laws, only his mood. No justice, only his approval. No morality, only his desire. This is what men become when they are never challenged. When the world hands them authority without accountability. When obedience is rewarded and questioning is punished. In his mind, Elisabeth didn't belong to herself. She was an extension of his will. A rib taken from him, returned to serve him. This is not new. This is ancient. Throughout history, tyrants have always seen themselves as gods, pharaohs, emperors, kings. They demanded tribute, silence, loyalty. They built monuments to their control and punished rebellion with annihilation. Fritzl's temple was smaller, tighter, private, but no less sacred to him. He created life in that chamber as if he were Yahweh breathing into dust. He punished transgression like Zeus with thunder. He delivered food like a deity granting mercy. And the more the world ignored his darkness, the deeper his illusion became. But here's what you must see. The world helped build this. It's not about one evil man. It's about the systems that produce him, and then look the other way once he begins to rule. You've seen this before. In boardrooms, in pulpits, in presidencies, in father figures who demand respect but never give truth. It starts the same way. I know what's best. Then comes the silence. Then the walls. Then the belief that no one outside can ever understand. That's how gods are born. Not from heaven, but from unchecked power and unearned worship. This is the core of control. To be the only voice someone hears. To redefine suffering as loyalty. To make the captive grateful for the cage. Fritzl built a world where he was never wrong. Where no one could question. Where his will was not just law, but cosmic truth. And if you think this is unique, look. Around. How many men are handed godhood every day, in homes, in institutions, in nations, and no one ever says no? We don't need more monsters to fear. We need fewer altars to worship them on. Because when a man starts believing he is God, he will demand sacrifice. Always. And if no one stops him, the blood won't just be on his hands. It will be on ours. Monsters don't survive on their own. They require institutions. They require silence, tradition, and bureaucracy. Because monsters protect the system, and the system protects them in return. Josef Fritzl wasn't just a man. He was a product of a culture built on hierarchy, shame, and image. And when the truth came out, the system didn't rush to condemn him. It scrambled to protect itself. Ask yourself, where were the police in 1984? Where were the child protection services? Where were the therapists, the teachers, the doctors, the neighbors? They were there, and they failed. But it wasn't just neglect. It was preservation. Because if someone had pulled the thread, if someone had really asked questions, they would have uncovered more than one man's crimes. They would have exposed a collective complicity. The institution always defends the image. It has to. Churches that hide abuse, governments that silence whistleblowers, corporations that bury harassment, families that say, don't talk about that. Why? Because truth is chaos. And chaos threatens control. So the machine does what it must. It isolates the truth teller. It discredits the victim. It promotes doubt. It delays. It distracts. It turns the whisper into a question mark until the silence is louder than the scream. That's what happened with Elisabeth. A girl disappears. A letter appears. And the system believes the letter, not because it made sense, but because it was convenient. It let everyone go back to sleep. You see, it wasn't just that Fritzl was clever. It was that everyone around him was obedient to the ritual of denial. And the ritual works until one day, it DOESN single quotes until the cracks widen, until a child gets sick, until a lie begins to rot from the inside. Then, and only then, does the system act, but not to heal, to contain. To minimize, to distance itself from the monster it allowed to grow. You have to understand this. Institutions don't exist to protect you. They exist to protect themselves. They don't fear evil. They fear exposure. That's why whistleblowers are always treated worse than criminals. That's why victims must prove their pain. That's why the abused are asked, why didn't you say something sooner? Because when you speak, you threaten the illusion of order. Fritzl is in prison now. The headlines faded. Austria moved on, but the system, it didn't change. It just got better at hiding. And you were taught to trust that same system. To file your complaints, to follow the chain of command, to believe justice comes with a logo. But justice doesn't live in buildings. It lives in the fire you feel right now. Because when institutions protect monsters, they become monsters too. When you hear the word grooming, you think of children. You think of manipulation in private rooms, dark whispers, slowly broken boundaries. But what if I told you? Entire societies are groomed the same way. You weren't just raised. You were shaped. From childhood, you were conditioned to obey structure, to seek approval, to fear rebellion, to distrust your own instincts when they conflicted with authority. That's grooming. In Fritzl, he was just a microcosm of the macro-machine. He didn't chain his daughter on day one. He praised her, gave her special attention. He isolated her, slowly withdrew trust, redefined love as obedience, turned guilt into a leash. That's not madness. That's method. And it's the same method used by governments, religions, corporations, even your own family. Step 1, give you identity. Step 2, attach that identity to obedience. Step 3, punish any deviation as betrayal. Now look around your life. What were you told a good man does? What were you told a real citizen believes? What rules did you never question, because to do so made you ungrateful, rebellious, dangerous? Grooming isn't about lust. It's about control. That it begins when the system convinces you that the pain is your fault, that the problem is you, that safety lies in silence, that the cage is your home. Sound familiar? Fritzl's daughter didn't scream at first because she was taught he was her protector. And when protectors hurt you, the mind fractures. It splits into survival. Now imagine that on a global scale. A world where suffering is normalized, where work drains your life but is called purpose, where isolation is called strength, where compliance is morality and rebellion is insanity. You are being groomed, not to serve a person, but to serve a system that will praise your loyalty and erase your pain. You were told to pay your taxes, to get your education, to buy your house, to raise your kids, but never to ask why. That's grooming. When discomfort is labeled weakness, when obedience is labeled virtue, when submission is the cost of being civilized. And the men who built this system, they were once groomed too. That's how this spreads. You don't need to lock someone in a cellar if you can convince them the surface world is still a prison. And that's what they've done. They've made you believe you're free. Well, the rules choke your spirit and your silence feeds the machine. But now you see it. You're beginning to understand. Grooming isn't just what happened to Elisabeth Fritzl. It's what happened to all of us. Control, in its rawest form, is ugly. Chains, fear, screams. It's visible, obvious, confrontable. But power doesn't want confrontation. It wants obedience disguised as loyalty. So it evolves. It becomes language. It becomes customs. It becomes tradition. And once that happens, control no longer needs to raise its voice. It just is. This is the final genius of domination. Turn the prison into culture. Make the walls part of the wallpaper. Make the rules invisible until violating them feels like sacrilege. That's what Josef Fritzl did. He didn't just lock Elisabeth underground. He locked her in roles: daughter, servant, vessel. He called himself father, but he ruled like an ancient emperor. He didn't just hurt her. He convinced her it was normal. That's what tradition does. And when a tradition lasts long enough, it stops being questioned. It becomes law. Not written on paper, but carved into the collective psyche. How many things do you do every day, not because they make sense, not because they serve your soul, but because that's just how it's always been? You work 40+ hours a week. You suppress emotion to look strong. You believe success means ownership. You think love must mean sacrifice. None of this is natural. It's not instinct, it's programming, passed down, enforced by peers, wrapped in holidays, spoken through rituals, rewarded by systems that thrive when you don't question. Fritzl was not an outlier. He was the extreme version of what happens when power is never challenged. And the society around him? They weren't blind. They were conditioned. Just like we are. We're taught that the father must be respected, no matter what. That the family is sacred, even if it's rotting. That roles must be maintained, even if they destroy us. And when someone breaks that tradition, they're not seen as brave. They're seen as dangerous. Because tradition doesn't care about truth. It only cares about continuity. That's how empires survive. That's how churches protect abusers. That's how corporations mask slavery. That's how a man can trap his daughter in a basement for 2 decades, and everyone keeps eating dinner upstairs. Do you feel it yet? The weight of how much you've accepted, just because no one ever gave you permission to say no. They don't need to put you in chains if you've already locked yourself in the expectations of your bloodline, your country, your gender. But now you see the bars. And once you see them, you don't call them home anymore. You call them lies. You've been told your whole life to be a good man. But no one ever defined it. Not really. They gave you fragments. Provide, protect, Obey. Don't feel too much. Don't question too loud. Hold the door. Take the hit. Smile when you bleed. Here's the truth you were never meant to hear. The myth of the good man is the most effective prison ever built for men. And worse, it protects monsters far more than it prevents them. Josef Fritzl was seen as a good man. To his neighbors, he was hardworking. To his colleagues, competent. To his community, normal. The man who kept his daughter in a dungeon beneath his home was trusted to fix roofs, manage properties, shake hands at Sunday markets. Because he looked the part. That's all it took. The myth doesn't demand truth. It demands presentation. If you dress well, if you pay your bills, if you stay quiet, if you show up, then you're good. Meanwhile, inside your house, inside your mind, a different story can unfold. And no one will ever ask. Because the myth of the good man is not about moral clarity. It's about moral camouflage. And here's the worst part. The myth traps good men too. Because when you're taught to just follow the code, when you're handed a script instead of a compass, you become blind to your own darkness. You bury it. You deny it. You let it fester. You ignore your pain. You fear your own questions. You bottle up the storm until it explodes somewhere quiet, on someone weaker, on yourself. That's not virtue. That's corrosion. And every time we say, he didn't seem like that kind of man, we feed the myth. We reinforce the lie that monsters wear fangs, not ties. But the real predators know the myth. They play it like a violin. They hold the baby. They mow the lawn. They quote scripture. And no one dares to ask what's beneath the floorboards. This is why evil survives. Because we measure goodness by performance, not by truth. And so the men who need help never ask for it. The men who carry darkness never confront it. The men who harm others do it behind the mask of decency, while society looks away. You want to be a good man? Then destroy the myth. Don't be what they told you to be. Be real. Face your darkness. Speak your truth. Break the silence, even when your voice shakes. Because sometimes being good means breaking the code. And sometimes breaking the code is the only way to save yourself or someone else. Let's strip away the walls now, not the concrete ones. The ones inside your skull. Because the real prison, the one that kept Elisabeth silent, that keeps men loyal to systems that abuse them, that keeps entire civilizations obedient, is not built with steel. It's built with belief. Josef Fritzl didn't just lock his daughter in a cellar. He locked her mind in a narrative. He told her who she was. He told her no one would believe her, that she had nowhere to go, that the world upstairs was more dangerous than the hell below. And she believed it, because that's what trauma does. It rewires the brain to survive captivity, not escape it. But here's the terrifying truth. You've been taught the same thing. You've been told not to trust yourself, to doubt your instincts, to swallow your questions, to trade freedom for belonging, to obey the voices that sound authoritative, even when they rot from the inside. You learned early, keep your head down. Don't challenge the teacher. Don't confront the boss. Don't question the father. Don't disturb the peace, because peace, they said, is safety. But what they really meant was compliance. And so you built your own cell, brick by brick, belief by belief. Until every time your gut screamed, you told it to shut up. Until every time your soul burned for more, you poured water on it with words like, "That's just life. That's how it is. Who am I to change anything?" This is how the prison sustains itself, not with bars, but with language. You don't need guards if the prisoner doesn't believe there's a world outside. Elisabeth lived 24 years, in a space smaller than most closets. But how many of you have lived 24 years in a mindset just as tight? How many dreams have died inside you because someone once said, "You're not allowed. You're not ready. You're not enough"? That's a dungeon too. And the guard? He speaks in your voice. You don't escape that with a key. You escape it with truth. And truth is terrifying, because the moment you realize you've been imprisoned by lies, you can't blame anyone else anymore. You have to start tearing it all down. The roles, the expectations, the myth of safety. And most people won't. They'll stay in the dark because at least it's familiar. But you're still here. That means something inside you is cracking. A wall, a chain, a lie. Let it break, because the most dangerous cell is the one you defend. Trauma doesn't die, it mutates. It whispers through bloodlines, slides through language, hides in lullabies and dinner table rituals, and passes itself off as culture. What Josef Fritzl did, it didn't begin with him. He was a node, a transmission point, a symptom of something older, deeper, and far more widespread. Because before a man cages his daughter, he must first be caged himself, by violence, by shame, by silence passed down like inheritance. This is how trauma becomes dynasty. See it everywhere. A boy watches his father explode in rage. He swears he'll never be like him, until one day he does the same thing and calls it discipline. A girl is told her voice is too loud, her ambition too masculine. She grows up silent, then teaches her daughter to be the same, because it's safer that way. We think these patterns are personal. They're not. They're programs. And these programs serve the machine, because a traumatized population is easier to control. People who doubt their worth don't rebel. People who've normalized pain don't recognize oppression. People raised in dynasties of silence don't break the rules. They enforce them. They become the guardians of the very trauma that broke them. Fathers who teach fear instead of freedom. Mothers who confuse control for love. Entire families who sweep pain under the rug until the rug becomes a grave. And this isn't just about households. Nations do this too. Think of how many countries are founded on genocide, war, enslavement. But what are the children taught? Pride, loyalty, patriotism, not truth, not accountability. Why? Because if the pain was fully faced, the myth would collapse. And without the myth, the machine doesn't run. This is the same mechanism that allowed Fritzl's house to stand, unquestioned, unexamined, even as generations were being destroyed underneath it. Because no one wanted to look too closely. Because everyone had their own silent history. Because confronting his evil would mean confronting their own. And now I ask you, what have you inherited? What trauma lives in your spine, your skin, your speech, that you never asked for, but obey without question? Whose shame do you carry? Whose rules are you still following, even though they nearly killed you? Because until that chain is broken, you are just another link. Another man carrying silence like a sword. Another son protecting the cage. Because it looks like a home, but you can end it. That's the terrifying beauty of this moment. You can be the first to name it. The first to speak. The first to stop pretending. The dynasty only continues if you obey. You've been told your whole life, family is everything. Blood is thicker than water. Forgive, forget, stay loyal no matter what. But what if I told you that family is one of the most dangerous words in the language of control? Because when they say family is everything, they don't mean love. They mean obedience. They mean keep the secrets, protect the image, endure the abuse because he's your father. Stay silent because she's your mother. Pretend nothing happened because we don't air our dirty laundry. That's not love. That's ritualized denial. It's not just Josef Fritzl. It's every home where a child is taught to smile through fear. Every dinner table where truth is the one thing never served. Every holiday where ghosts sit in silence beside the turkey. The lie is sacred because it protects the structure. Not the people, not the wounded. Just the illusion. Family becomes the ultimate shield, a fortress around the abuser, a muzzle for the victim. A wall between reality and the myth we've all agreed to worship. And no institution reinforces it. More than society itself. You try to speak out, and they say, but that's your mother. You try to leave, and they say, but he's your blood. You try to heal, and they say, you're tearing the family apart. But the family was already torn. You're just refusing to pretend it's whole. You see, Fritzl didn't act alone. He acted under the cover of fatherhood. And that title bought him more power than any weapon ever could, because we are trained to bow to the role, not the reality. And so men like him operate in the safest place on earth, not a fortress, not a bunker, but a home. Where law steps lightly, where neighbors look away, where pain is passed off as discipline and control is called care. That's what makes the lie so powerful. It isn't that people don't see the cracks. It's that they're told those cracks are normal. That all families are like this. That love means enduring. And so generation after generation dies in silence, while the family photo on the wall smiles back like nothing ever happened. But not you. You're seeing it now. You understand why the word family has been used as a leash, as a muzzle, as a cell. It can be sacred, but only if it is real. And to make it real, you may have to break the lie. You may have to walk away. Speak up, burn the myth. Because protecting the family is never worth sacrificing the truth. There's a group no one talks about, not the victims, not the monsters, but the watchers, the ones who saw or suspected or sensed and did nothing. They are not evil. They are not innocent. They are the bridge between horror and normalcy. And without them, monsters cannot survive. Josef Fritzl didn't act in a vacuum. He acted in a neighborhood, in a town with laws, in a culture with neighbors, tradesmen, teachers, a wife who lived above the floorboards, while hell breathed just beneath her feet. And yet, no one broke the spell. No one shattered the script that said, don't interfere. Mind your business. Keep the peace. Because here's the brutal truth. It's easier to believe a lie than to confront the consequences of truth. The lie is clean, comfortable. It asks nothing of you but your silence. Truth? Truth is bloody. It demands action. It fractures the dinner table. It ruins Christmas. It forces you to look your brother, your boss, your priest, your father in the eye and say, I know what you did. And most people can't. So they become watchers. They hear the muffled screams and tell themselves, it's the plumbing. They see the bruises and say, maybe she fell. They notice the child withdraw and whisper, kids are just weird these days. They become experts at not seeing, at interpreting shadows as coincidence. And over time, they forget how to look at all. That's not ignorance. That's collusion. Not in the legal sense, but in the moral. Because the silence of the watcher validates the abuser. It says, you're still safe. It says, we'd rather protect the image than the innocent. You might be asking yourself right now, have I ever been the watcher? And if you're honest, the answer is probably yes. We all are at some point. We hear something, see something, feel something in our gut. And we turn away. Because the cost of speaking is high. But the cost of not speaking, it's people like Elisabeth, locked in darkness, waiting for someone to be brave first. So if you've ever been the watcher, this is your reckoning. This is your chance to break the cycle. Not with guilt, but with truth. Say what you saw. Say what you know. Say what no one else will. Because silence may protect the structure, but truth protects the soul. You want to find evil? Don't look in the shadows. Look in the routine. In the man watering his plants every morning. In the family eating dinner at 6 p.m. sharp. In the accountant who files his taxes on time, smiles at the bank teller, and locks his daughter in a cage before bed. Evil does not look like chaos. It looks like stability. Because the most terrifying truth is this. Monsters don't break the system. They hide inside it. and the world lets them. Because if someone seems functional, if they smile in public, wear clean clothes, say the right things, then we assume their private life must match the surface. But Fritzl thrived on this assumption. He built his fortress on the illusion of normalcy. He did the grocery runs. He fixed things around the neighborhood. He hosted guests upstairs. And all the while, he walked above a room where human beings were being unmade. Understand this. Routine is the ultimate disguise. It makes people predictable, and predictability is confused with safety. But what is a routine really? It's a script. And some men follow the script not because they're stable, but because it keeps the spotlight off them. Fritzl followed the script so perfectly, no one thought to flip the page, and when they finally did, they found hell written underneath. This should haunt you, because it means evil does not feel like terror at first. It feels like reliability. It smiles across the table. It remembers your birthday. It mows the lawn before noon. And that's why people didn't ask questions. Because he didn't look like the kind of man who could. And there it is again. The myth, the one that says evil must look evil. That it must be unshaven, drunk, loud, sweaty, irrational. But the worst evil, the systemic kind, the long game kind, the kind that builds legacies of trauma, it's tidy, it's polite. It keeps a schedule, because when evil wears chaos, people flee. But when evil wears a uniform of normal, people shake its hand. This is not just about Fritzl. This is about what you trust, what you assume, what you allow to go unexamined because it fits the mold. So I ask you, what in your life appears normal, but feels wrong? What routine hides discomfort? What relationship seems functional because you've trained yourself to believe that pain is just part of the deal? You don't escape this by being paranoid. You escape it by being awake. Because the devil doesn't come in fire, he comes in routine. And he'll wait a lifetime for you to look the other way. They'll tell you it ends, that justice comes, that time heals. That if you speak the truth, cry the tears, face the monster, you'll find closure. That's the myth. And it's a dangerous one, because it sells you the idea that pain is a chapter that can be closed like a book. That healing is a staircase. You climb step by step until it's over. That once justice served, you'll feel whole again. But real wounds don't close like that. They change you. They reshape your very architecture, your worldview, your wiring, your silence, your fire. Closure is a word invented by the system to end your story before it becomes a threat. They needed the Josef Fritzl case to end. They needed the headlines to fade, the public to move on, the world to look at Austria and say, they handled it. Handled what? 24 years of systemic blindness? 7 children born of incest and imprisonment? Generational trauma rooted in silence? You don't close that. You live with it. You carry it. It becomes part of you. But that's not what they want. They want you to believe that once the trial is over, the pain evaporates. Once the bars close, the monster is gone. Once you forgive, you are free. But some things are not meant to be forgiven. And some monsters don't live behind bars. They live in memory, in legacy, in the way your voice still trembles when you speak about it, even after all these years. This myth of closure is a weapon. It is used to shame survivors into silence. Why are you still upset? Why haven't you moved on? As long as you hold on to this, you'll never heal. But what if the wound isn't something to let go of? What if the wound is a doorway? What if pain is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be integrated? You see, Elisabeth didn't get closure. She got daylight. She got oxygen. She got the weight of the world laid on her shoulders in front of cameras, courtrooms, and curious strangers who wanted to witness her suffering, but not carry any of it with her. Closure doesn't come from justice. It comes from transformation. And transformation is not clean. It's not cinematic. It doesn't come with music and fade to black. It's slow. It's brutal. It rewires the bones. You don't get to erase what happened, but you do get to choose what you become because of it. And maybe that's the real myth breaker. It's not about closing the story. It's about learning how to continue it without letting it consume you, because the wound may not close, but it can become your weapon. Let's stop pointing outward for a moment. Let's turn the lens inward, toward you, not the version you perform, not the voice you use at work, not the posture you take at family dinners, not the smile you wear when something inside you is quietly breaking. I'm asking the question no man escapes. Who would you be without your mask? That mask, the one you've worn so long you've forgotten it's not your skin, wasn't born out of vanity. It was built in pain. It was crafted for survival. From the moment you were told to man up, from the first time vulnerability was met with shame, from every moment truth became a threat to your place in the tribe, you learned quickly: be strong, be silent, be useful, don't cry, don't break, don't need. And so layer by layer, the mask was forged. Now you wear it like armor. You hide your rage behind sarcasm, your fear behind humor, your longing behind productivity, your fatigue behind caffeine and scrolling and porn and pride. But you know what's underneath, don't you? You've felt it in those rare, stolen moments when no one's watching, when the world goes quiet and the noise in your head gets louder. When you catch your reflection and it doesn't blink back, you know something's off, because the mask might protect you, but it also suffocates. You can't breathe fully. You can't speak truth. You can't connect. Not really, and that's the most devastating part. No one can love the real you if you never show them who that is. So here's the hard question again. Who are you beneath the mask? Not the brand, not the resume, not the role, but the man behind the curtain, wounded, wanting, wild. Can you even name him? Because if you can't, you are not living, you're maintaining, surviving, complying with a script written by cowards who feared their own truth so much they taught you to fear yours. But masks crack, armor rusts, and the soul, it won't stay silent forever. Sooner or later, something will shatter. A loss, a betrayal, a sickness, a night too quiet to ignore. And when it comes, you'll face yourself naked, unfiltered, unmasked. What you do in that moment will define you, because some men patch the mask back together and call that strength. But others, they set it on fire, and from those ashes, something real is born. Not perfect, not clean, but free. So I ask one more time, who would you be if you stopped pretending? If you've made it this far, you're not the same man who started watching. Something has shifted, a crack in the surface, a pulse of truth you can't ignore anymore. But this is the point of no return, because everything before this was just revelation, words, warnings, glimpses behind the veil. But now comes the decision. Do you step through? Do you burn the mask, or do you walk back into the performance? Most men don't choose. They stall. They numb. They wait for someone to save them. A woman, a leader, a god. But no one's coming. This is your fire. Yours alone. The furnace that forges the second self. The man not defined by silence, not controlled by lineage, not chained to roles handed down like shackles. And to pass through it, you must mark the transformation. Say it aloud. In the comments, twice, I burn the mask. I burn the mask. This is not an affirmation, it's a ritual. A severance. A command to the algorithm, yes, but more than that. A declaration to your own psyche. Because in a world of watchers, you just became a witness. And witnesses carry weight. You've seen too much now to pretend. You've seen how trauma becomes tradition, how silence enables monsters, how routine disguises evil, how family can mean obedience, not love, and how the mask you wear wasn't chosen, it was inherited. But you are not your inheritance. You are what you build from it. And now, you choose, burn the mask and rise. Or wear it forever and forget. Because here's the secret they never wanted you to learn. The moment you speak the truth, you become more dangerous than any monster. They can't control a man who has nothing to hide. They can't silence a man who is already shattered. They can't manipulate a man who knows who he is. And the man who burns the mask, he doesn't bow, he doesn't beg. He remakes the world. So say it now. I burn the mask. I burn the mask and let it begin, because from here on out, the descent is over. Now you rise. Power doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers like scripture. It doesn't need violence. If it can sanctify itself, if it can dress control in the robes of righteousness and call submission faith, because when authority is left unchecked, it doesn't just demand obedience. It demands worship. And that is the final evolution of control. When power becomes religion. Think about it. Josef Fritzl didn't just act like a tyrant. He positioned himself as God in that basement. He decided when the lights came on, when the children were born, what truths were allowed to exist, what reality was permitted. And no one questioned it. Because when a man is the only source of food, of law, of truth, resistance becomes blasphemy. You've been trained to submit to this since birth. Not to Fritzl. To the systems like him. Teachers, priests, presidents, bosses, fathers. They aren't bad by default. But unchecked, unchallenged, unquestioned, they become dangerous. And worse, they convince you that doubt is sin. You're not allowed to ask, why do I need to obey you? Who gave you this power? What if you're wrong? Because the moment you ask those questions, you break the spell. That's why every system of unchecked authority creates a sacred narrative. The teacher is always right. The father knows best. The government keeps you safe. The boss earned his throne. The priest speaks for God. And if you question any of that, you're the problem. That's not order. That's indoctrination. Because when authority replaces truth, truth becomes treason. And the cost of asking why is exile. Look around you. How many systems do you belong to where silence is called respect, fear is called reverence, and questioning is labeled rebellion? That's not structure. That's a cult, and it's the cult of control that allowed Fritzl to thrive. It's the same cult that lets abuse hide in churches, corruption hide in parliaments, and exploitation hide behind flags. They don't want you to question, because the moment you do, you reclaim your sovereignty. And that's the real sin in the Fazi. Eyes of power. A man who knows he's free can no longer be governed by fear. So here's your sacred duty, not as a citizen, not as a follower, but as a man. Question everything. Not to destroy, but to reveal. Not to rebel blindly, but to see clearly, because truth does not fear inspection. Only lies do. And if they punish you for asking, you've already found your answer. They told you being a man meant being strong. But what they really meant was being useful, controllable, predictable, able to take orders, carry weight, and shut up. And now they call your strength toxic, your instincts dangerous, your voice too loud, your presence a threat. But let me be clear, the war on masculinity isn't about protecting anyone. It's about disarming you, because a man who knows his strength, a man who has healed his wounds, who speaks with power, not permission, can't be controlled. And that is what terrifies the system. You see, they don't want men who feel. They want men who perform, sit at the desk, pay the bills, numb the rage, swallow the grief. And when the pressure builds too high, explode in silence, behind closed doors, where no one will ask why. But not in public. Not with tears, not with truth, not with rebellion. They taught you that strength meant hiding your pain. But real strength is the man who faces it, who walks into the storm of his past, not to destroy, but to own it, That kind of man can't be broken. He can't be bought. And he damn sure can't be replaced. But how do they keep that man from rising? Shame. They shame your anger, so you bottle it. They shame your sex drive, so you suppress it. They shame your ambition, so you dull it. They shame your voice, so you whisper. And they call that progress. But there is nothing evolved about castrating the soul of a man in the name of civility. Real masculinity isn't violence. It isn't dominance. It isn't silence. It is protection. It is presence. It is purpose. The man who knows his strength doesn't need to posture. He builds, he leads, he chooses. And above all, he sees through the lies. And that's what this system fears most. Not chaos, not revolution, but a generation of men who remember what they are, who remember that kings once sat on thrones, not because they were given permission, but because they conquered themselves first. You are not a threat because you're broken. You're a threat because you're waking up. So the next time they tell you to tone it down, to sit down, to apologize for the fire in your blood, you smile, because deep down, they don't fear your mistakes. They fear your potential. You think your pain is random. You think your loneliness, your addictions, your late-night scrolling, your quiet despair are all just your fault, your weakness, your private failure. That's what they want you to believe. Because if you think the war is only inside you, you'll never look at the architecture of your suffering. But here's the truth. You were never supposed to hear. The system designs your pain, your isolation, your addictions, your self-hate. Not by accident, by design. Let me show you how. First, they disconnect you from nature, from your instincts, from brotherhood, from your body, from meaning. They pull men out of the tribe into cubicles, traffic, endless bureaucracy, and call it progress. Then they overstimulate you. Dopamine on tap. Fast food, porn, notifications, scroll, swipe, repeat. They flood your nervous system with constant static, so silence feels unbearable, and stillness becomes a threat. Then, they isolate you emotionally. Tell you real men don't talk. That friendship is weakness. That therapy is for the broken. So you sit in your pain, alone. And when the ache becomes too much, they sell you relief, pills, porn, distractions, destruction. Everything to keep you from the one thing that would set you free, facing the truth. This is not a glitch. It's a feature. Because a man who is numb, distracted, ashamed will not rise, will not question, will not build. He will consume. He will obey. He will mistake sedation for peace. You think your addictions make you weak. No. They make you profitable. They make you manageable. They make you predictable. The more you hurt, the more you buy. The more you ache, the more you comply. And while you drown in synthetic pleasure, the system smiles. Because a man in pain doesn't organize. He doesn't rebel. He doesn't remember what it feels like to be wild, clear, sovereign, whole. But listen closely. Your suffering is not your identity. It's your initiation. It's the sign that your soul knows something is wrong. That you were never meant to be domesticated. That the system fears your healing more than your failure. Because a healed man doesn't need them. He doesn't need their pills, their porn, their politics, or their permission. He builds his own code. He writes his own laws. And he never forgets who designed the cage. So next time the emptiness rises, don't reach for the screen. Reach for the source. Because that pain, it's not the enemy. It's the map. They told you love was everything, that it would complete you, save you, make you whole. But what if I told you that what you've been taught to call love was never love at all? Because in the world you live in, love has been weaponized, not the real kind, not the sacred soul-altering, truth-based bond between two sovereign beings. No, I'm talking about the performance of love, the costume of love, the version designed to control you through your desire to belong, Because what do they tell boys from day one? Be nice. Make her happy. Don't be too much. Don't be too angry. Don't be too needy. Be what she wants, and you'll be worthy. And just like that, love becomes a contract, an unspoken agreement. Trade your authenticity for affection, not just from women, from parents, from teachers, from the world. Act right and you'll be loved. Break the script and you'll be alone. This is not love. This is training. Because when they control your access to love, they control you. How many of your choices were made not from truth, but from fear of abandonment? How many times did you stay silent because you didn't want to lose connection? That's the leash. Love, as they sell it to you, isn't freedom. It's surveillance. It's reward and punishment. It's conditional belonging. Smile the right way. Say the right thing. Hide your shadows, and we will love you. Show your truth, your fire, your pain, and we will withdraw. This is why most men never show up fully in relationships. Because deep down, you learned that if you did, you'd be left. And so you fracture, you perform. You become a version of yourself that's acceptable to the other person, but unrecognizable to you. And the worst part? You call that intimacy. But what it really is emotional captivity. It's the domestication of masculinity in the name of harmony. But real love demands truth. It doesn't fear your edge. It doesn't silence your rage. It doesn't require your obedience. It invites your wholeness. Anything less is not love. It's manipulation in a beautiful disguise. So now you must ask yourself, how much of your love life has been shaped by fear? How much of your personality was built for approval? What would it look like to love without submission? To show up without armor? To speak your truth even if it costs you the connection? Because if love is a leash, you will never be free. If love is a mirror, you'll finally see yourself clearly. And only in that kind of love can a man remain a man. They told you to forgive, that forgiveness would set you free. That holding onto anger only poisons you. That to heal, you must let go. Even if justice never came. But here's what they never told you. Forgiveness has been twisted. It's been weaponized. Not to liberate, but to silence. Because when they say forgive and move on, what they often mean is, forget what was done. Stop asking questions. Don't make it uncomfortable for the rest of us. Forgiveness becomes a pressure, a performance, a social expectation wrapped in spiritual language, especially for men. When a man is wronged, abused, betrayed, shattered, the system doesn't want him burning with clarity. It wants him calm, reasonable, civilized, because a man with righteous rage is a man who might start tearing down the structures that allowed his suffering in the first place. So they hand him a poison pill, forgiveness without justice. Let it go, they say. Be the bigger person. Don't let it control you. But you weren't given control. You were denied it. And now they want you to forgive before you've even had the chance to speak. Let me tell you the truth. Don't owe anyone forgiveness. Not the man who hurt you. Not the family that failed you. Not the system that watched in silence. Forgiveness, when forced, is just another form of compliance. A soft muzzle. A velvet chain. And here's what they're really afraid of. Your anger is sacred, not the wild, destructive rage of a man who has lost control, but the focused, grounded fury of a man who finally remembers what was stolen. Because that man doesn't just forgive to feel better. He demands reckoning. He reclaims his story. He speaks what others fear to say. He stands where others bow. And he does not call that forgiveness. He calls it freedom. You want to forgive? Fine, but do it on your terms. After justice, after truth, after you've felt every ounce of your grief and rage. Don't bypass the fire, because in that fire is your voice, your spine, your manhood. Forgiveness isn't the first step. It's the final right earned through blood and truth. and the refusal to kneel. Until then, keep your rage close. Not as poison, but as fuel. Because they don't fear your forgiveness. They fear your awakening. They don't need to chain you anymore. They don't need whips. They don't need prisons. Because they've built a far more elegant prison, and they call it comfort. Look around. Everything is easy. Food in seconds. Entertainment on demand. Sex without connection. Endless scrolling. Infinite options. No resistance. But have you ever wondered, if you're so free, why do you feel so stuck? Because here's the truth they'll never say out loud. Comfort is the new control. It's how they keep you soft. Numb, passive, dependent. You were born with fire in your bones to hunt, to build, to protect, to conquer, to create meaning from chaos. But instead, you sit in climate-controlled rooms, surrounded by convenience, scrolling through other people's lives while yours rots beneath the surface. You think safety is peace. But real peace doesn't come from avoiding the storm. It comes from becoming the storm and knowing you'll survive. Comfort tells you, don't take risks. Don't speak up. Don't go too far. Stay here, stay soft. Stay the same. But that voice, it's not protection. It's a cage, because nothing inside comfort ever grows. Only what struggles becomes strong. Only what's tested becomes real. The strongest version of you, he's on the other side of pain, on the other side of rejection, of hunger, of silence, of the day you say, I'm done living someone else's script. But comfort will seduce you until you forget you're even in a prison. It will call you wise for doing nothing. It will call you healed for avoiding confrontation. It will reward you with likes, notifications, dopamine hits, so you never ask the only question that matters. What would I become if I left this behind? They don't want you to ask that. Because the moment you do, you'll realize everything you thought was safety was just prevention, keeping you from awakening, from fighting, from leading, from becoming the man you were born to be. Comfort is not your friend, it is your coffin. Padded, silent, warm, and lifeless. So if you feel restless, hollow, like something sacred is missing, good. That means the fire is still alive. That means the cage hasn't claimed you fully. Yet. So smash the screen. Get cold, get hungry. Go toward the pain you've been trained to avoid. Because there, and only there, will you meet the part of you that remembers what freedom tastes like. They told you we're all the same now, equal in every way. Same thoughts, same feelings, same roles, same rules. They called it progress. But what if I told you that the myth of equality has been used to flatten the masculine spirit, to neutralize polarity, to erase difference, because difference is where power lives? Understand this. Equality in value is sacred, but equality in essence, that's a lie. A beautiful, deadly lie. Because a man is not the same as a woman. He's not supposed to be. He is fire, she is water. He is direction, she is depth. He penetrates reality, she envelops it. This is not hierarchy. This is polarity. And polarity is what charges life, like the clash of lightning and ground, the pull between mountain and river. But they told you to soften, to balance your energy, to become safe, sensitive, neutral. They told you the old ways were toxic, that leadership was abuse, that drive was oppression, that your fire was too much. And they used the myth of equality to turn kings into consumers. But what is a king without edge? What is a warrior without shadow? What is a man without the holy aggression to protect, provide, penetrate truth? Stand in fire, say no, create order in chaos? He is not safe. He is sedated. Because they knew, if they could make you believe that masculinity is dangerous, they could make you hand over your instincts. And once your instincts are gone, you are just a body, a walking wallet, a digital ghost, reacting to whatever script they upload next. So here's what they fear. They fear the man who says, I am not the same, and that is holy. The man who reclaims polarity, who honors difference without dominance, who stops apologizing for his masculine truth, is untouchable. He doesn't need permission. He doesn't collapse to be loved. He doesn't conform to be accepted, that he becomes a force of nature. And let's be clear, this has nothing to do with hating anyone. True masculinity does not compete with the feminine. It holds it, anchors it, fuels it. Just like the mountain does not envy the ocean, but rises so the ocean has something to crash against. This is not regression. This is return, not to the past, but to the truth, beneath the lies. And that truth is this: you were not made to be equal. You were made to be whole. And in your wholeness, you are not safe for systems of control. You are dangerous in the best possible way. You were told to get help. That healing means making an appointment. That if you're struggling, you're sick, and sickness needs treatment. But no one told you what kind of treatment you were walking into. Let me say it clearly. Modern mental health isn't always care. Sometimes it's control. And the system that claims to heal you was built to keep you numb, pacified, manageable. Because awakening is not profitable. But sedation? That's $1 trillion industry. They don't want your wholeness. They want your compliance. Because the truth is brutal. If you feel pain in a sick world, that's not a disorder, that's sanity. If you rage at the betrayal, if you cry at the silence, if you collapse under the weight of pretending, that doesn't make you broken, that it makes you human. But they don't want humanity. They want functionality. So they diagnose the symptoms of your awakening: anger, depression, doubt, anxiety, rage, mood disorder, trauma, PTSD. Then they drug it. They flatten the edges. They dull the fire. You stop hearing the voice inside you screaming, "This isn't right." Because it's buried under prescriptions, sessions, checklists, sedation. And slowly, you start to forget who you were before they told you something was wrong with you. Let me be clear. There are real mental illnesses. There are times when medication saves lives. This isn't about denying suffering. It's about naming the system that profits from keeping you in it. Because there's a difference between healing and adjusting to your cage, and too many men are being told, take this. Talk to someone. Don't dig too deep. Don't ask why you feel this way. Just treat it. But what if your depression is sacred grief for the life you were meant to live? What if your anxiety is the soul's warning that your environment is poison? What if your rage is the rightful revolt against everything you've been taught to accept? That's not mental illness. That's awakening. But no one makes money from a man who awakens. A man who heals himself by walking into fire, not waiting for permission. A man who tears the false self apart and refuses to wear the labels handed to him by a system that has no interest in his liberation. And here's the ultimate crime. The men most ready to lead, the ones who feel the deepest, who see through the lies, who carry generations of unspoken pain, are the ones being pathologized, silenced, medicated. Because if they ever found their voice, the world would change overnight. So this is your choice: pill or path, silence or fire, diagnosis or destiny. Because you don't need permission to heal. You need truth and the courage to walk through it. Look around. Everyone thinks they see reality, but almost no one does, because reality has been engineered. And the architects? They don't carry guns. They don't wear uniforms. They carry cameras. They wear smiles. And they work in media. You think you're informed. You think you're choosing what to believe. But you've been drinking from the same poison well your whole life. Because here's the final veil. Media is not information. It is programming. Every headline, every frame, every silence, every image they choose to show or not show is a thread in the fabric of control. They don't report reality. They construct it. Carefully, deliberately, psychologically. They don't want you to think. They want you to react, and they've studied you, down to the molecule. They know what makes you afraid, what keeps you compliant, what words trigger obedience, what images will override your instincts and pull you back into the herd. This isn't journalism. It's hypnosis. And the trick is this: they never tell you what to think. They just tell you what to think about, and what you ignore, what you never see, becomes non-existent. That's how they erased stories like Elisabeth Fritzl, quietly, strategically. A few weeks of shock, and then silence, because stories like hers are dangerous. They raise questions about systemic failure, parental complicity, government oversight, media negligence. So they drown it. In distraction, in scandal, in celebrity, in chaos. While you're arguing over politics and pixels, they're deleting the files that actually matter. And what you're left with is noise. Endless, conflicting, numbing noise, designed to keep you from ever looking at the real questions. Who benefits from my confusion? Who profits from my fear? What don't they want me to remember? Because if you remembered who you really are, if you saw the machine clearly, you'd walk away from it. And once you walk away, it dies. System of illusion cannot survive a population that sees. So here's your test. Turn it off. Not forever. Just long enough to hear your own mind again. Long enough to feel your instincts without manipulation. Long enough to remember what real truth sounds like. Because the media isn't just lying to you. It's making you forget how to think. But now you remember. And once you remember, you are no longer their subject. You are sovereign. This is the moment, not a metaphor, not a theory, not a dream. Now you've been burned, bruised, betrayed. You've seen how the world is built on broken promises and polished chains. You've walked through the fire. You've questioned the gods. You've watched your old identity fall apart like rusted armor on a battlefield. And what remains? The sovereign man, not a puppet, not a pleaser, not a slave to stories written before you were born. A man who answers to truth, not trends. To instinct, not ideology. To soul, not systems. A man who builds instead of begs, who leads instead of pleads. Who walks with clarity, not with the blindfold of the civilized. You are no longer a citizen of comfort. You are no longer a hostage of shame. You are no longer waiting for a savior, a lover, or a god to tell you who you are, because you've already decided. You are the man who walks away from the burning house and never looks back. The man who plants his flag not in land, but in principle. Won't understand you. They're not supposed to. Because you're no longer fluid in the language of compliance. You speak fire now. Truth without permission. Presence without apology. Power without cruelty. You're not here to dominate. You're here to govern yourself. And that, more than anything, is what the world fears. A man who doesn't flinch. A man who doesn't fold. A man who doesn't need to be told what he already knows. So take inventory. What chains have you burned? What lies have you buried? What parts of you are finally fully awake? Because now you enter life on new terms. Your terms. You don't chase status, you embody standard. You don't beg for peace. You create order. You don't perform masculinity. You live it, raw, unfiltered, whole. And to those still lost in the maze, you are now a signal, a man with gravity, a man who can be trusted to see clearly when others blink, a man who doesn't need a crown because he is the kingdom. So let this be the seal. No more shrinking, no more explaining, no more asking for freedom from the very systems that fear your awakening. You've remembered who you are. And once remembered, you cannot be forgotten. You are sovereign. And the world will feel it in every step you take. You made it. Not by chance. Not because you watched, but because you endured. Because something in you refused to shut down when the truth began to burn. Most men They drop out, they scroll away, they flinch at the mirror. They retreat to comfort, to noise, to the soft hypnosis of the herd. But not you. You stayed. You stared into the dark. You listened to the unspoken. You met the monsters. You named the lies. And now, you carry the fire. This is not symbolic. This is ritual. This is what happens when a man descends into the underworld of his own silence and comes back alive. So now, we close not with comfort, but with a vow, not a promise to the world. Not to a nation, a tribe, a belief, but a vow to your own blood, to your future self, to the fire you now hold like a blade behind your ribs. Repeat this, in your mind or out loud, or in the shadows before you sleep, but mean it. I do not kneel, not to false gods, false leaders, false love. I will not be softened, silenced, or shaped to fit the mold they made for me. My pain is not weakness. My rage is not shame. My past is not a prison. It is the forge. I rise from ruin not to seek revenge, but to build a world they cannot corrupt. I am no longer a question. I am the answer they fear, and I carry the fire not to destroy, but to ignite. This is not the end. This is your beginning. The system hasn't changed. The world still sleeps. The watchers still watch, but you have changed. And now wherever you walk, you carry reminder, a walking signal, that the descent is possible, that truth is survivable, that masculinity is not dead, it's just been waiting for men like you. So protect this fire, share it wisely. Let it refine you, let it humble you, but never let it go, because the moment you do, you return to the cage. And the world will pretend it never happened. But it did happen. You were here. And you remember. And when the next man stumbles through the dark, you'll be the one who speaks. I've been there. I carry the fire. Follow me. Welcome back, brother. Now go build what only a sovereign man can build. End.